I'm sorry, Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Councilman Gillespie, Councilman Wood, Councilman Argo, Councilman Miller, Councilman Reniger, Councilman Bowles, Councilman Fank.
Having a quorum established, I hereby call this Prattville City Council public hearing to order. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, let me thank you for coming out tonight for this public hearing. Secondly, let me give you my apologies. I gave you erroneous information for those of you that were here last Thursday evening about when we would have the air conditioner replaced in City Hall. They are currently working on it. They hope to have all of their preparations finished hopefully by the end of this week, and then they will actually begin to replace the air conditioning units next week. Depending on the weather that we have on Monday and Tuesday, there is a possibility that City Hall may be closed on Tuesday, depending on the heat, because there will be no air on at all in this building, and it may become necessary to move the City Council meeting to Doster. We have already reserved Doster in the event that that becomes necessary. So please be watching the media and be watching our website and be looking for emails if you signed up for an email service so that we can make sure that everyone knows whether or not we will be in here on Tuesday or whether we'll be at Doster. We want to try to make it as comfortable for everybody as we can. So I do apologize for giving you the erroneous information last Thursday. We have one item on our public hearing agenda this evening. It's an ordinance to prohibit electronic messaging and texting while driving. Obviously, we don't have a room full of people, so I won't give you my normal spiel about keeping it short and to the point, and don't get up and speak if someone else has already given you. I was already given your opinion, and so I'm going to go ahead and just say we're here at your disposal. We want to hear from you. We hope that you will have an opportunity to give us your opinion on this issue. It is on our agenda for next Tuesday evening, June the 1st. That's when it will be eligible to be voted upon, but we did want to have this public hearing prior to that meeting so that we would at least have an opportunity to give the public a chance to express its opinion on this particular issue. I'm going to ask, we only have one person signed up, but since there are more than one person in the room at the moment, I'm just going to ask if there's anyone that wishes to speak. I'm going to call on this person first, and then anyone else that wishes to speak, just raise your hand and I will call on you. When you come to the podium, please give us your name and your address so that we'll have a record of your attendance and we can make sure that it's correctly identified in the minutes. The person that is signed up to speak right now is Laura Lee Boone. Ms. Boone, would you come forward, please?
Good evening.
Good evening.
In the South, that's really the way in the past we have been. We have liked more personal rights, more civil liberties, and that's the way I would vote if I were here. you know, California has a ban at this point on handhelds, and I feel like we're going that direction. If we just keep on making laws, first it's texting. Well, how can you tell that you're not dialing while you're texting? So let's just go ahead and ban all handheld cell phones. Well, let's just go ahead and ban McDonald's in the car. Let's ban turning the radio. What about that GPS? So it can be a landslide here, and I think that this is just the very beginning of a landslide when it comes to legislation. I also believe that we can be profiling a very specific sector of our city when we make this ban, and that is generally 18 to 30-year-olds. These are the people who are probably the most likely in their car to be texting, to be holding that phone, to be having gadgets of any type that might be receiving messages. And these young people certainly don't need to be distracted drivers, but this really needs to be more of an issue of education, an issue of parental involvement, instead of an issue of city legislation. And I feel like they're the ones who will be the most likely to be ticketed in this case. And then my last point is, if you pull someone over and you are going to ticket them for this texting issue, we don't have any type of standard here. I know that there's been much discussion in past meetings about how are we going to fine this, or is there going to be jail time? What's the fine? Well, if you look up the fine in California and the fine in Wisconsin, the fine in Washington, D.C., you're going to get a plethora of answers. Everybody's going to have a different fine because this is not a moral issue. It's not a capital punishment issue. It's an issue of legislation where it's really difficult to set a fine that's appropriate, because what might be appropriate to one person is $10, and what might be an appropriate fine for another might be $50 or $500 or 10 nights in jail or 1 night in jail. And it just really gets to be an issue there of who's going to make that decision of what's an accurate penalty for this crime. I think we'll have trouble proving and enforcing this issue, proving that someone was actually texting instead of dialing, or texting instead of some other reaching for the radio. And I just think that could be a real problem to enforce it. People say, well, you can just check the phone records. Well, who's going to pay to subpoena for that? I mean, we're talking about a privacy issue here as well. Perhaps someone has a private phone call and doesn't want their work to know that they were making this call, or doesn't want their spouse to know, or so on and so forth. It gets into a privacy issue when you talk about subpoenaing records. So what we're looking for more is a voluntary compliance type thing, where someone would have to say what they were doing. It would be a compliance issue where the police officer asks, were you texting? And how many people are going to be honest when they know that the penalty will be a ticket? Lastly, I want to just challenge my city councilman as a constituent in your neighborhood. I'll ask you that you will vote no on this, and I'd like to ask the rest of you, even though I am not a voter in your districts, to consider that there are other viewpoints out there. I know you've heard a lot from Mr. Argo, and I do believe that it's a valid point that we have safety issues, but I'm talking more about legislation tonight than about safety. I mean, you can bring up lots and lots of statistics in this case scenario where so-and-so's brother-in-law died in a car accident, and we can bring up all kinds of statistics. But as Mark Twain once said, there are only 3 types of lies: lies, damned lies, and statistics. So we all know that you can maneuver the numbers. You can move the numbers around to make them reflect your point. You can make them reflect my point. I'm not here to talk about statistics. I'm here to talk about legislation. And instead, I challenge you to make this an education issue. Let's educate instead of legislate. Let's do some PSAs. Let's talk to these targeted age groups in the schools. Talk to parents. Get in the newspapers. Get on the news. Let's talk about educating people about being careful when they drive in all issues, not just texting, instead of making a law that we're going to have trouble enforcing. And let's go with the voluntary compliance issue instead of with legislating this. Thank you very much for your time this evening.
Anyone have any questions or comments for Ms. Boone? Mr. Gillespie.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And thank you for coming down. I do agree with you in several areas there. I'm not in favor of big government. I do believe that education is really where this needs to be going to, because one thing, we can't fix stupid. If people are going to get out there and be stupid, texting and driving, we really can't fix it. That's one reason I do have a problem with the jail time that's on here, and also the fine area. I am planning on lowering the fine, dropping some of the jail time if my other council members will agree with me there. But I really don't know if we have a problem here in Prattville with this. I do know there is a problem nationwide with it. There's statistics have been out there that show that people have been killed, maimed, and so forth over this. It is something that's needs to be brought up more toward education than anything else. I've been talking with other council members about if this does get passed, we put signs up mostly around the school area, because I think that's where a lot of the people are going to be at with, they're going to be texting, and hopefully this is the first step for education right here tonight. But thank you for coming out.
Any other questions or comments from Ms. Boone? Dr. Miller.
Not really a comment. Well, not really a question. It's a comment. I just want to applaud you for really good oratory skills. You really gave an organized presentation, and I don't agree or have the exact same views on some of the elements. Others I do share with you, but I really just wanted to compliment you for your speaking skills.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I have several.
Okay. I'm ready.
First of all, I appreciate you standing up here and espousing your views. From all of the people I've heard from, you're the only one who has said that you were opposed. So I applaud you for that. I truly do. Secondly, I appreciate the fact that you included me in the 18 to 30-year-olds. That made me feel really good. I am guilty of this. I truly am. And I know a lot of people that are my age, which are much older than 30, that are guilty as well. And like most laws, they are merely to bring awareness to a problem. They were never really intentionally passed for enforcement, which I understand that may be the root of your argument, is that a lot of things get passed, no real way to enforce them. There's other ways to get to that. So I applaud you for that. But I do want to disagree on a couple of issues. Number one is, how do you feel about stop signs? Truly, how do you feel about stop signs?
They're necessary.
Okay, what about yield signs? What about red lights? What about rolling up to a stop sign but continue to roll and go through? If you were to be guilty of those, would you turn yourself in if you weren't seen?
Probably not.
Probably not. That's really my whole issue with texting while driving, is that there are a lot of people who do it. So when someone says, I'm really not sure if that's a problem, I don't really think you're being truthful. We know it's a problem. We read in the newspaper almost weekly where someone has been killed while someone else was texting or distracted because of a cell phone. We had an Alabama truck driver that killed several people in Kentucky just 2 months ago, who records prove was texting and on the telephone when that accident happened. So that is a real issue not only in Prattville, not only in Alabama, but in our nation as a whole. So I do think that it is an issue that is worthy of our discussion and worthy of an ordinance in this case, if it does nothing else to bring awareness to the fact that should be prohibited. It should be outlawed. There should be no reason for anyone to be driving an automobile and looking down and texting at the same time. There's no excuse for that. And education is not going to do that, because we have education every single day in our high schools with our driver's education programs. You do not roll through a stop sign. You do yield to oncoming traffic. You do obey the traffic signals such as speed limit signs. But yet every day we have speeders and red light runners and stop sign runners every day. So education is not going to get it. It's the same way it is with a seatbelt. We passed a law, we being America, passed a law through Congress that we had to wear a seatbelt. I'm claustrophobic. I cannot stand to have anything strapping me down to a seat. But I wear my seatbelt because once it became a law, I had to obey. If it was left to me, I would not wear a seatbelt because I am petrified of being tied down. Now, that is the same way I'm looking at texting while driving. If it is a law, then the majority of people will not, instead of the majority doing it, even though they know it's wrong. The second point that you made about enforcement. Police officers have a difficult job, and I'm the last one that wants to add more burden to them as they are out keeping our community safe. But it's the same way with littering or running a stop sign or running a red light. If you do it in the presence of an officer, you will be stopped, and you will be given a ticket in most cases. So, in my opinion, if I see you texting as you're driving down the road and I'm a citizen, I'm not going to come down here and fill out a complaint that says that you ran me off the road or you rear-ended me or whatever the case may be. But an officer is trained in noticing things that a lot of us are oblivious to as we drive. If an officer passes me, my first thought is, he can't possibly tell I'm not wearing a seatbelt. I went by him so fast, he cannot tell. But when he whips around and pulls me over and says, Mr. Argo, you weren't wearing your seatbelt, how could you possibly see that? I went by so quickly. Well, I stopped you for speeding, but as you went by, I noticed you didn't have your belt on. So officers are trained to notice things a lot of us never do, especially behaviors that are extremely, extremely dangerous. And the last point you made about education, about the cost of about getting records from cell phone use and things like that. PSAs cost more money than subpoenaing records from a telephone company. So I would much rather do that. And I'll be willing to bet you that as you drive your children to school and pick them up in the afternoon, you know if someone in front of you or behind you or beside you is texting, because you can look over and see if they've got their head down in their lap. You know what they're doing. So you are aware of it. Others are going to be aware of it. And if there's an ordinance prohibiting it, then I think the majority of people will not. And then eventually, through that type of education, which unfortunately laws are a type of education, then we will get at this problem. Now, that's my spiel, and I appreciate you listening to me, and I'll be glad to take any rebuttal you have.
I think that it's very naive to believe that just because we have a law that most people are going to follow that, especially when it's a law that does not have anything to do with morality. I mean, it has to do with conscience, absolutely. Well, I really shouldn't be doing this. I might hurt someone. But when we're not talking about a moral issue and there's nothing there to that, I think that it's very naive to believe that people will just follow it because it is a law. Seatbelts, I think that took a couple of generations. That was your example of law that caused you personally to follow the law, even though you personally are not comfortable with that law. You follow it in order not to be caught, or because you finally realized education-wise that it is the safer thing to do for you personally, while it does not affect anyone else's safety, whether or not you personally wear your seatbelt. I believe that is not really comparison to texting, because we are talking about other people's safety here, and I just don't believe that if you are not conscious enough about your own safety, then you're not going to worry about someone else's. I do appreciate your points very much. As far as PSAs costing money, I worked at 95.1 The Fox for many years, and we did those for free. So wouldn't cost very much at all to call a radio station and go, hey, I've got a 15-second slot for you. Don't text while you drive.
Well,
actually, a 5-second slot.
I appreciate you pointing out about your work experience, but I worked for 12 years for TVs and radio stations, and I do know that PSAs do cost somebody. May not be passed on to that particular person, but it does have a cost. But I do appreciate the fact you just proved my point. You said it was more about other people's safety than it is my own. So I appreciate you pointing that out.
That was not my argument at all. I personally feel that it is a safety issue and that they are endangering us by doing that. I don't have a problem with your argument one bit. I'm in total agreement with that. My argument is more about legislation than it is about safety.
Well taken. Thank you. Any other questions or comments from Ms. Boone? Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate
Thank
you coming
you.
tonight. Absolutely. Is there anyone else that wishes to address the City Council on this issue? Yes, sir.
I'm Bobby Cavendish, 1604 Guiding Way Lane, represented by Mr. Bill Gillespie. I would just like to say that we have enough laws for them to, pretty much you can't drive down the road without breaking a law. Seems like, at least for me here lately, for some reason. But it's just something else it seems like for them to pull you over for, because like she said, I don't know how they're going to determine whether you were actually dialing, just looking to see what time it was. You know, it's going to be you against the officer. And of course, then they'll pull you over, and then that's when they notice that you don't have your seatbelt on, you know, or you don't have your copy of your insurance record with you. So it just seems like to me that's something that they're going to pull you over for anyway. Now, if you're texting and you're driving bad, they're going to pull you over for driving bad. Is that not correct? So I consider myself a professional texter because I've been doing it for a long time. And so I myself, I trust myself. And I do see people coming down the road and they'll be all in my lane and stuff like that. But if that's happening, I think the police officer has a reason to pull them over anyway. Now, as far as there being any kind of a jail time in this or anything, I can think of a lot more worse things that you can do to actually have to do jail time. Now, I really don't have time to go over all that because I know y'all don't either. It's hot and it's time to get out of here. But I would just like to say that I am really against it for the purpose of I think it's at my own risk. If I know I can't do it, then I can pull over and do it. But I've been doing it for so long, and it saves me a lot of time. I'm a multitasker, so unfortunately in today's time, you got to be able to do a lot at one time. I got 3 teenagers that I can tell you that they can text and never look down. You know, so if it's safe for anybody, you get a kid fresh out of high school, and I promise you they can text and you'll never even know it. Okay? But I appreciate y'all's time. And also I'd like to thank y'all. I finally received my trash can today. And so now it's official. Y'all are picking my trash up.
Bobby, did it have wheels on it when you
Yes,
got
it did.
Good
That one
deal.
did. Had chrome wheels on it.
Anyone have any questions or comments for Mr. Cavanis? Thank you very much for coming.
Thank y'all.
Appreciate it
Appreciate
very much. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak on this issue? Surely to goodness, somebody wants to say something. Okay, seeing nothing, I'm going to declare that the public hearing is now closed. And again, I will remind you that this will be on our agenda Tuesday evening at 6 o'clock. We invite you to come out that night. I do know that that is election night, and a lot of folks are going to have a lot of things to do, but we'll try to keep it as short as possible so you can get home and watch the returns. With that, I'll ask if there is a motion to adjourn the public hearing. Motion. Have a second. All in favor say aye. Aye.